Like many of you and everybody pretty much on the panel, big sports fan here, and from time to time when it seems that my team's getting too many penalties, too many key decisions from the refs or umpires going against us, you say, hey, what's going on here? Is this thing rigged? Now, you know down deep, or at least hope down deep, it's not the case here. But the question still nags a lot of folks and says, is it fair? Is my team really getting a fair shot? I want to bring Andrew in because that analogy here, and obviously some of the recent stories that we've seen, most specifically with about the high-speed trading, the lack of equity that's attached to it, has a lot of folks saying, what exactly is going on? I'm a believer in capitalism, warts and all here. But if you don't start from a concept that the markets are even fair, then what?
But giving everybody a fair shot to win the same game is at the heart of all this, Rich, with that sports analogy and the two stories that you mentioned. Let's start with Wall Street. And the headline's coming from a new book by Michael Lewis called Flash Boys. It's been excerpted in the Times and profiled Sunday on 60 Minutes. It's about a recent trend on Wall Street of using technology to essentially cheat investors in tiny amounts on transaction after transaction. The upshoot?
The stock market's rigged. The United States stock market, the most iconic market.
Who are the victims?
Everybody who has an investment in the stock market.
That Michael Lewis, the author, that rigging relies on two key facts. One, that the stock market floors we're so used to seeing aren't really where the markets work anymore. Instead, the real stock markets are in rooms like the one you're about to see, computer servers where almost all the trades happen electronically. The second fact is for the time it takes for trades to be completed by computer. It's fractions of a second. For those trades, like cars at rush hour, have to travel down information highways, and some traders figured out a way to bypass the highways that most trades take, then take that information and rush through their own trades faster than anyone else. It can be just pennies per trade, but they add up to billions.
The insiders are able to move faster than you. They're able to see your order and play it against other orders in ways you don't understand. They're able to front run your order.
What do you mean front run?
It means they're able to identify your desire to buy shares in Microsoft and buy them in front of you and sell them back to you at a higher price.
You want to buy them for 100, they'll sell them to you for 105 in the time it takes to hit a keystroke, and it's all perfectly legal, at least for now. Now, the other form of legalized cheating we've seen in the news lately is something we've reported on many times before: restrictions to voting, all aimed, it seems, at preventing minority, immigrant, and youth voters from casting ballots. The change here is that these are happening en masse in Republican-led swing states, and many thanks to the Supreme Court's repeal of the Voting Rights Act last year. Things like reducing the hours the polls are open on Election Day, reducing the days and hours of early voting, reducing weekend voting in particular, especially the Sunday before Election Day, when church members often vote as a group. New voter ID laws, many of them photo ID laws, so even government worker cards not allowed. Proof of citizenship requirements, either at the polls or just to register to vote, eliminating same-day registration and so-called pre-registration for high school students to speed the process when they turn 18, and new restrictions making it harder for anyone to apply for an absentee ballot or cast a provisional ballot if something goes wrong at their polling place on Election Day. All of these laws are now on the books in places. They've all gone on the books in the past few years, and again, all in Republican-led swing states like North Carolina, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And they will all be in place for the midterm elections this November, Rich.
Again, I want to talk about, this is one of the best things about this country is we can fight about stuff, right? But if you saw the 60 Minutes piece and you read the excerpts of the book, this isn't about, and one guy today in the Times couldn't help himself and said, you know what, we're getting penalized for being smart and making money. No, you're cheating. There's one thing with learning the market, trying to figure out where there's bargains to be made, where the industries are going. That's intellectual capital that you should use and make as much money as you want. But you're taking my trade through an algorithm and a computer and getting ahead of me to buy something that I thought of here just to make a buck off of me. That doesn't make you smart, that makes you cheat. And when it comes to voting here, I'm sorry, Richard, I'm coming to you here, okay?
I expected that.
Yeah, okay. But how exactly isn't the whole idea that we want people to participate in the process? Don't even give me the voter fraud BS. We both know that's been proven it's a crock. But the idea that we don't want people going from church groups, three, you guys are more likely to have gone to these churches than Andrew and I, okay? Definitely you. And that is, how exactly is that what anybody thinks the Founding Fathers had involved to have an involved citizenry?
Well, let me first say that the Supreme Court
has not struck down the voting rights law. They simply said the provision, which is Section 5 of pre-clearance, which was areas in which, or it could be a whole state, could be a whole redistricting area,
happening in North Carolina or Texas,
where they had past discrimination. They had to pre-clear their redistricting with the Department of Justice. That's what the Supreme Court said. Well, why should they have to go pre-clear going forward if there's no discrimination now? So that's what the Supreme Court struck down. So the Voting Rights Act is still much very in play. Secondly, look, voting is a very important part of this country. And there have always been some restrictions on voting. It used to be that you had to be a male and a landowner. So this is nothing new. Look, we want to make
going backwards, Richard.
No, we want to make voting as fraud-free as possible. Okay, look, the fact that you have to show an ID, that's not
been a question.
Well, in some areas you're right. And for example, in Pennsylvania, that hasn't been a question, and that particular voting.
North Carolina, it was.
Well, I'm not saying
don't even believe
but I'm
that.
just saying it was
Okay.
struck down in Pennsylvania.
That's the point.
Yeah,
he doesn't believe half of what he has to say right now as a major Republican.
Here's the thing: voting.
He doesn't believe
the people
this
in those
nonsense.
states believe that they
I know
needed
him
more
very
protections, more protections to vote.
Richard,
It's
you
true.
are good, and I give you props for it. But Dominic, this is about time out. They look at the map and they say, "Wait a minute."
You know
So
what
many
this is
guys
about?
that look like you were
know-
voting here.
know
We
what
got to
this
get the
is
number
about?
down, right?
It's a lot deeper than that. They don't ever want to have another Obama. They looked up and they said, "Oh my God, they will turn out in record numbers if they can vote for someone that they like." It doesn't have to be a black candidate. It can be a progressive candidate. Obama scared them in ways because he went and won the state of Indiana, and no Democrat had done that since 1964. And a black man won the state of Indiana. That was enough to scare their boots off, and that's what you're looking at.
The liberals have caused this on themselves with organizations like Acorn, who were just riddled with fraud. I mean, if it wasn't for stuff like that, well, thankfully, but if it wasn't for stuff like that, you wouldn't have this rise in the voter ID laws.
Richard, I give Richard a whole lot of credit for arguing. I give him a whole lot of credit tonight.
He caught himself on this.
Of course he did. I love Richard too, but even he's shuffling. He
Can't
knows
say it
it.
on TV.
What bothers you most about the Wall Street story?
It's the lack of fairness. It's the same thing that bothers me with both of them. This is supposed to be a country where if you build a better mousetrap, you thrive, and that's how you make your money. But instead of selling your political party with the better ideas and convincing more voters, or instead of the better insight where you know what to buy low and sell high, it's making money off the system. It's rigging the system so that the money just sort of trickles down into your lap. And I think that's contrary to the spirit, and these are two twin pillars of our society, capitalism and democracy. They shouldn't be gamed for political advantage. You want to win, do the due
You make
diligence
the
and
point.
win.
Do you imagine if we found out that the refs were on the take in the Final Four, let's say, this country, we'd have pickets because everybody's brackets, there'd be like time out here, people betting stuff. We'd have riots in this country, right?
Or if the NBA said the Knicks have to be in the final so they get all the close calls. I mean, the rest of the country would go nuts.
But now we're talking about the right to vote, and we're talking about the right to be able to invest and have a fair shot, and somehow you get the vibe. If we're not careful, this thing could be yesterday's news in a week or two. You know what I mean?
And part of it's because it's hard to explain. And on the Voting Rights Act, it's complicated because there are competing arguments that can be made. But at the underlying core...
I want to ask you a quick question. Why do you think people buy the Bloomberg terminal, and why he's made so much money off of those little boxes on Wall Street?
Because you want to get information first.
You get it fast. So I'm not saying it's right, but
it's
they're working the system.
They're gaining as much. I think it's a huge distinction. I've heard this one today. There's one thing with getting as much information so you can make as an informed an opinion as you want, okay? And you're going to spend real money to do that and get that terminal. But there's another difference, that when it comes time to press that send button to make a purchase or to tell your trader buy, that some hump out there isn't just smarter than you. He's taking what you're doing and making money off of you. That's different than I've ever seen before. And I think the analogy you made about voting, it's the same thing. All right. Coming up next, a new report's out from the CDC, and it says autism affects 1 in 68 kids. It also shows a huge disparity between boys and girls. And coming up, we're going to be speaking with Lisa Goring. She's the Executive Vice President of Programs and Services at Autism Speaks New York. As we come back, Mr. Ross, thank you so much.